Hello. So this is my first sit down YouTube video. Honestly, it feels so weird. Like, who the hell do I think I am? But one of my most common asked questions on Instagram is if I can do like a bit of a behind the scenes on what it's like being a financial advisor. And I thought what would be a good way to start is maybe we go through the initial process and what you can expect as a client when you first see a financial advisor. So the first meeting depends kind of how you were intro to the financial advisor. It could be anything from 30 minutes to an hour. So what the kind of first things does is the financial advisor or me, I would normally give a little bit of an intro as to what we do, how we might be able to help. We then speak to the client and the client, we kind of walk through, okay, well, what are they working for? What are they trying to achieve? What are their goals? And we try and spend around about 15 minutes talking about that. So if you're gonna go have a meeting with a financial advisor, the way that you can best prepare for this is to think about, okay, well, what do I want to achieve with my money? Is that a job move? Is that I want to move house, or I want a gap year, I want to retire, whatever it might be. After we've established those goals, what we then do is we run through something called a bit of a fact find, and I'll share here what that kind of looks like. Obviously, this isn't shared with a client. This is kind of on my screen. I'll be talking to the client, or equally face to face, I just kind of know all the questions off by heart now. But we'll kind of talk around personal details. So it's actually really finding out all the numbers behind everything. So we'll talk about, okay, well, what's your property value? If you've got one, what's the mortgage? Are there any additional properties? We'll then go on to employment. That employment will be, what's your compensation look like? What's the base salary? Is there bonus? What does a bonus kind of vary between? Have you got a share scheme? What that is, talk me through that, what your tax position is. So we try and get as much detail as we feasibly can. The more information you can give, the more valuable the call is going to be. After we've done that, we then move on to kind of assets. What that essentially means is, okay, well, how much have you got in cash? Where is that? How much are you able to save on a month-to-month basis? Or are you able to save? What's your rough expenses look like? And then we'll also go through, okay, well, do you have any existing investments? Where are they invested? What do they look like? So that's kind of what that first meeting essentially entails. And it's basically just for the financial advisor to gather as much information as feasibly possible to be able to see if we can even add value. At the end of that meeting, I'm always really honest with whoever I speak to. If there's value that I can add, what I do is I commit to writing a report. That report basically outlines everything that I would do if I were in your shoes. So all of my tips, tricks, recommendations. I personally don't charge anything for this report. Both of the process or two-stage process is essentially free of charge. And that's because I genuinely believe if I'm writing a report for someone, I actually want to work for them, and I see, realistically they're going to have value from working with me as well. So I put in the work up front. All I do ask in return is if I do write a report, that we then sit down together and kind of go through that. What if I kind of go through the fact find the first meeting and there's generally no value that I can handle, or I don't think I could justify my charges? I'm completely honest, and I would essentially just say, look, you're doing all the right things, or I would point you in the direction, say, right, okay, well, you should be trying to save here, here, and here, or let's, this is really good, but let's touch base in 6 months' time. Because ultimately, again, I don't want to drag anyone else through the process when it could just be an easy win for them, where I could just point them in a direction. And equally, I'm not going to commit to writing a report if I genuinely don't want to work with you, or I can't see there being any added value. So that's kind of what the first meeting looks like. Then we'll go into the second meeting. The second meeting is what I call the report process. So this is where we run through the report, and I thought it would be good to kind of bring one up down here just so you can kind of see what it looks like. The first page is essentially a little bit about the client. So it'll be about reconfirming their goals. So everything I basically took from the first meeting. And to be honest, this page probably is a little bit more for me than it is for the client. But it's basically making sure that I didn't misinterpret anything in the first meeting. I'll then also include an assets table. That's basically everything that they said that they had to their name, so that again, I can make sure that I didn't misinterpret anything, because all of my advice in the report will be based on kind of this first page high level overview. After that, we then go into the actual recommendations. And to be honest, there's lots of different ways I lay out my reports. At the moment, I'm kind of loving a table style because I just think direct to the point, that's what we like. So whenever I'm thinking about recommendations for a client, I always kind of split out into 3 ways. So the first one is the short term, second is medium term, third is long term. And it's really important that whenever coming up with a financial plan, we're not just thinking about the short term goals, because medium comes around real quick, and then also long term, because long term tends to be the most tax efficient. So we need to have a blend of them all. So when I'm figuring out the short term, it's looking at cash. Okay, how much does the client need in cash to cover their short-term expenses? So a client might say, oh, well, Georgia, I've got a house renovation coming up next year and it's going to be 200k, so we need to keep 200k in cash. Or, I'm looking to purchase a house, or I'm going on a holiday, whatever it might be. We then keep that in a reserve. We then also make sure that you've got your emergency funding cash. So this is 3 to 6 months of essential expenditure. Where I would recommend holding the cash to completely depends on the client and their tax position. If they're additional rate, I would then always look at kind of premium bonds. Obviously, if we've maxed the premium bonds, then we'd look at cash management platform, and obviously some in your general bank account. So that's kind of where I think about the short term. So I always start any recommendations with cash, because that's what we need to leave aside. And then it's okay, well, I look at the investment, medium term investments. That normally is kind of your ISAs, your general investment account. So I always say, right, have you maximized your ISA allowance? If you haven't maximized your ISA allowance, that's kind of number one. But beyond that is then looking at general investment account. We're then figuring out, okay, well, how much to put in a general investment account, because any of the growth within there is subject to capital gains tax. So it's, again, looking at the client's individual circumstances. What does a tax position like? What can we kind of put in there to keep it accessible, but also make sure that, we're still growing and we're not just putting it in there for the sake of it. Then we look at the kind of longer term. It's okay, well, how much can we be putting into pension? Do we need to review their existing pensions? Can we make their pensions work a little bit harder for them? It might be, okay, well, I meet a client, and this happens more often than not. I do a review into their pensions and they've got, a really small exposure to equities. And that's where we see most of the growth. So I always look into, okay, well, what's your existing pensions look like? And then it's okay, well, can we do a top up? If we can't, then, lots of my clients are restricted by how much they can put into pension. So it's okay, well, if we can't do pension, what alternative kind of investment vehicles can we use for a pension? And normally that is onshore and offshore bonds. Again, from that, we're also looking at kind of tax efficiency. So we might say, okay, well, actually, we don't want to lock money away for too long, and it might be more VCTs. So I start with the table and I work from there. I say, okay, well, what are the client's goals? Where do they need access to money? What bits can I put in? How can we be tax efficient, but then also be tax efficient without locking money up for a really long time? Because, sometimes I meet a client in their 30s that, yes, we want to make sure that we're, maxing pension, etc. But actually, we're going to need it, or I want to access it maybe in 20 years, and I'm not going to be at retirement age in 20 years. So what kind of different investments can we do for that? So it's completely dependent on the client, and it's always worth obviously having a conversation, because it's not just kind of a simple do this, do that, do that, do that. It's you have to think of the tax position, what each element will kind of generate as a tax bill. We need to be planning against that. So it's always worth speaking to a financial advisor. And I always have people come across being like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready. Like, I'm talking all these big numbers. I don't know if I'm ready for a financial advisor. Does it suit me? Well, actually, it's more, everyone has to start somewhere. The sooner you start, the better you're going to be. I think realistically, if I'm being completely honest, for a financial advisor to kind of look at a case, you kind of need a minimum of 100k to play with. And that's not 100k in cash to invest with. It could be you've got 100k in old pensions and you need to have a look there. That's kind of, it doesn't all have to be accessible. So that's kind of the mark that I sort of go along. And then after we've kind of gone through the recommendations, we'll go through fund selection, where I think it should be invested, what that looks like. We'll then speak to the client and say, do you have any investing preferences? Beyond that, it then goes down into charges, how that all works. We have a breakdown there. We then go into a page which kind of benefits of a plan. So benefits of using me as a financial advisor. Normally it should be shown, throughout the report anyway, and the value should be there, but ultimately it's just kind of solidified, look, if you follow this plan, I'll save you X amount of tax, more incomes, fees, etc. And then beyond that is kind of just adding in any kind of what I call, I never know how to pronounce it, it's appendix? because I'm like, I swear that's something in your tummy. I obviously always have to look up at Google when I write into a report. I'm so dyslexic. So I always add appendices. Is it appendices or appendixes, whatever it is, I add them in. And that could be, you know, going into a little bit more detail on funds. It could be, you know, a client said, actually, I'm totally new to investing, I don't understand it. So I could break down that. I could break down pension contributions, any kind of additional information I add in the appendices. We're going to go with appendices for this. So that's always really helpful for a client. But I always say I add that in the bottom because I'd never like reports to feel super overwhelming. The only thing that I do also have in them, which I haven't touched upon, is reviewing existing investments. And it depends on where the client is. Reviewing existing investments might come along a little bit later, might be kind of initial recommendations in that report. But if it is reviewing, there'll be a whole page on kind of the performance, their charges, what that's looked like. Do we need to make any tweaks? So it's kind of a deep dive into what they've already got. Because sometimes people don't have extra money to invest. It's more, what can I make that I've already got work harder for me? And that's basically how it happens. I've been rambling on for like 11 minutes. So I hope you found that useful as to a little bit of an insight as to behind the scenes of how a report works. But let me know kind of what videos you would find useful from a financial advisor's perspective, and I can try and do it on YouTube. My New Year's resolution was to do more YouTube videos. So this is step one. Anyway, I hope you enjoy. Like and subscribe, which I think is what people say. Anyway, have a lovely day.